going to be our presenter.
Thank you, Mike. And let me know if you have a problem hearing me, but just want to kind of go through what we have found so far. My name is Mark Manuel. I'm with the engineering firm England, Timms & Miller, and we were selected to perform this study. So we wanted to share with you what we've discovered so far. And as Mike said, we're very interested in your questions and comments to try to make this the best study that we can. So a little bit about the project background, the history. First, in 2008, the city completed their pedestrian bicycle master plan. And 6 years later, when they joined the TPO, the River to Sea Transportation Planning Organization, within a few years of that, after joining that, the TPO did a study which focused on the elementary schools and the school safety review. But one recommendation in that 2017 report was for the study for the city to consider completing a pedestrian accommodation feasibility study. So, as far as what the criteria was used to try to implement the 2008 plan, it was part of the reasoning was the vicinity of residents to parks and schools. We also wanted to fill in any gaps if there was a portion of sidewalk here and a portion of sidewalk there, and we could build a segment in between. We also wanted to connect to regional trail networks and obviously any construction and cost constraints. There's only so much money. We'll cover that again at the end of the presentation, but that's a very real, potentially a real constraint. So since 2008, there has been, so in this 14-year period, there have been 60 miles of bicycle pedestrian facilities, constructed within the city limits. More than $10 million has been invested to improve bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And as of today, there are more than 130 miles of pedestrian paths within the city limits. And per this, I'm just going to quote from the 2017 report. The goal was to identify a feasible exclusive pedestrian facility. Preferably, the facility will provide physical separation between the roadway and an ADA-compliant pedestrian facility. The study should identify the cost, right-of-way, and takings implications of various approaches. Interim solutions can be implemented as long as these do not compromise the ultimate goal of providing an exclusive pedestrian facility. So the goal is to have a facility that exclusively is for pedestrians or for non-motorized users. So as of today, most of the facilities that were proposed in the 2008 plan, which was for the arterials and major collectors, the larger roads, have been constructed or will be constructed as part of future roadway projects. So then we come to our project. So that's kind of the background. And then what our project was is to consider the residential collector roadways. And those are the ones that are kind of highlighted on this map. Most of them were existing, the typical sections are existing 50 feet wide or 60 feet wide. And our job was to try to develop alternatives and try to come up with cost feasible solutions that would address the problems that we identified. So we started with 70 roadways that we looked at. And as part of that, wanted to make sure that we defined what we were looking at. Did we lose it?
There we go. Oh, there we go. Good thing, not something.
Disney.
We good?
Yep.
So for the definitions, a residential collector roadway is a road that has the driveways on it, typically connects to an arterial or major collector on one or both sides of the road, both ends of the road. And so for, so then the follow-up question was, what's an arterial or a major collector? So that's the roads that are the higher speed roads, usually have a speed limit of 35 or higher. They typically do not have any residential driveways on them. Did it mean?
It's on power, it's on power.
So these are the roads which were within the 50 feet right of way. So we just listed all of the roads that we've studied that have a 50-foot right of way. Similar, these are the roads that we studied with 60-foot right of way, and I'll be glad to pull these back up if you have any questions. But we started with 70 roadways, and these were the ones that we've studied. And our project objectives were to improve pedestrian mobility, to identify the challenges. You know, if we come up with an option, what are the challenges, what are the constraints, and also we wanted to develop reasonable solutions. So, you know, one of those goals is to improve the pedestrian mobility. So as I read earlier, for the 2017 report, you know, we want to try to identify an exclusive pedestrian facility on these roadways. Our goal is to provide physical separation if we can from the travel road, from the travelways, from the travel lane. Needs to be ADA compliant if all possible, and we did consider interim solutions. So then what are some of the challenges and concerns? Well, obviously the implementation costs to design, construct, and maintain whatever it is that we identify. Excuse me, what are the residential or neighborhood impacts if we do some of these improvements? Are they going to be right of way or easement? Can I go backwards? I think I'm just not pushing the button. Yeah. I'm sorry about this. The right-of-way easement implications, the drainage impacts caused by it, and the unintended consequences that could occur. If we do some of these things, we may unintentionally increase the travel speeds. Sorry about this. Increased travel speeds. Some of the options may actually encourage on-street parking. There may be other issues that we identify. And then we wanted to develop reasonable solutions. So what are the options to construct sidewalks? That's what we'd really like to do. If we can build a sidewalk, that's what we want to do. And we wanted to consider the options, maybe provide roadway shoulders if sidewalks aren't an option. And even we looked at the option of converting a road to one-way operation, if that makes sense. So those were our reasonable.
Yeah. You only can leave. That's it. Can't go home. Or you can stay home.
So with that, I want to kind of go in and look at this to give you an idea from the different scenarios. So please excuse us for our technical difficulties. Yeah, we've talked about that. We'll make sure that this is available.
Oh, here we go. Who's the kid?
So this is the first option. So one of the options, this is a 50-foot right-of-way, so one of the options is a no-build option. So this is, we don't do anything, but we wanted to use this to give you an idea of what the road, a typical 50-foot right-of-way looks like today. So all the 50-foot right-of-ways have 20 feet of pavement, which is 2 10-foot travel lanes, and then from the edge of pavement to the right-of-way line. And then outside the right-of-way line, there's a 5-foot easement on each side that could also be used, especially from a construction standpoint. So the first option we looked at is, can we actually build the sidewalk? So this is an option, option one, where we build the sidewalk, but then that will mean that the ditches have to move further away from the road, and we have to probably make the ditches deeper to accommodate for the fact that we squeezed them in. So these are just, one option is you construct the sidewalk near the road. This is the option that we think is probably the most feasible for all of the we being ETM, this is an option that we think is probably has the most merit, but I want to go through all the other ones that we considered. So, you know, the option is to install the sidewalk close to the road, but move the swale closer to the residents. It does provide the pedestrian mobility, and it preserves most of the residents' front yard because the sidewalk will be closer to the road. But there are sidewalk construction and maintenance issues, you know, associated with that option. So option 2 is a very similar option, but it minimizes the ditch work. But what that requires is we would have to pipe the ditch. So we'd have a pipe underneath the ditch. There would still be a small ditch that would actually have inlets that would drop into the pipe, but we would accommodate the existing drainage by using pipes. But as I'll show you, the option 2 does the same thing as option 1, but it is a significant increase in construction and maintenance costs because you're going to be piping everybody's front yard along the length of the sidewalk. So option 3 is another option we wanted to at least explore, which is to provide shoulders. So because you have a 10-foot wide travel lane in each direction, if we added a 5-foot shoulder, that could be used as a shoulder, it could be used as a bike lane, it could be used for pedestrians, but it would give a space outside the travel lane for non-motorized uses. So that was an option. And so again, same as the first 2 options, it provides the mobility, but we think it could encourage on-street parking because we see a lot of parking, especially in a lot of the driveways. We're also concerned it could encourage increased travel speeds if there are no people in those shoulders, then people may be invited to drive faster. And then the shoulder construction and maintenance costs, that is a less expensive option than the first 2, so that's I guess a positive just from a cost standpoint. And then the last option is convert this to a one-way road. I'll show you on the next page. This basically has very limited applications. We're very concerned if it's a road of any length. I'm not sure this will be very popular with the residents. It may be popular for the people that live in the very middle of the road. That it really doesn't matter. But I can see somebody that lives on one end or the other having to drive the length to get to or from. You know, that could be an issue. So, but it basically is, we're taking the existing pavement and making it a one-lane road with 2 5-foot shoulders. So we have a laundry list of things to talk about here. It does provide some mobility options. It's no impact at all to the residents because we're using existing pavement. It's the least expensive build option because we're not doing anything to the pavement. But it does alter travel patterns, routes. It will increase emergency response time, or could increase emergency response time. Could encourage on-street parking again. Could again increase travel speeds. We think that compliance will be an issue. You know, if you live the third house in, do you go against traffic to get out to the intersection? And then obviously we need to add signs and pavement marks. So those are the 4 build options for the 50-foot right-of-way. And these are, when we look at the 60-foot right-of-way, they're going to be a lot of the same, but we have a little bit more right-of-way. So there'll be one difference. So again, this is no build option. This is what it looks like today. Most of this, any of the roads that are 60-foot right-of-way, they have 11 or 12-foot travel lanes. So that's a little bit different. And then option 1 is the same, construct the sidewalk near the road. So we would, you know, we have a little bit more room to work in that regard. Same improvements. It would provide pedestrian mobility, but it would be sidewalk construction and maintenance costs. So this one's a little bit different for the 60-foot right-of-way. There is an option where we could move the sidewalk away from the roadway, which from a safety standpoint would be a very good thing, and build the ditch between the road and the sidewalk. So this is an option. We don't think that's really feasible in the 50-foot right-of-way just because we don't have enough room. But in the 60-foot right-of-way, we think this is another option. So it has a lot of advantages, but it also has some disadvantages just like the rest. So it provides the pedestrian mobility, but it will impact most residents' front yard. And it also will probably impact the parking within the driveways. Because there's a lot of people that park in their driveways, and if the sidewalk comes through now, they're going to have to meander through the parked cars at each driveway. So, and then obviously the same sidewalk construction and maintenance costs. So this is the third option, which was, we've seen previously on the 50-foot right-of-way. This is to pipe the ditch. So you build a sidewalk, you pipe the ditch to reduce the impacts to the resident's front yard, and it has the same pros and cons. It does give you a sidewalk, but it also significantly increases the construction and maintenance costs. Option 4 is the same as before. It's to provide the 5-foot shoulders. Because the existing lanes are already 11 and 12 foot wide, we would only have to add 3 or 4 feet of pavement on each side. We would recommend the same 10-foot travel lanes with the 5-foot shoulders. And again, the same pros and cons. It could encourage on-street parking, could encourage increased travel speeds. But again, from a build option, it's a less expensive option. And then finally, option 5 is to convert to one-way roadway again, to take the existing, in this case, because the pavement is wider, the shoulders would also be wider. We recommend a 10-foot travel lane, and then we'd have, depending on the road, 6-foot or 7-foot shoulders. And again, very limited applications. The list of pros and cons is the least expensive option of the build, but it also has some concerns associated with it. And kind of what I've kind of hinted at the beginning is that, this is our project disclaimer, is that not all of the options that we've identified work for each roadway. So we're going to have to try to match the option that we've identified to the roadway. And there are limited applications for each, and there are limited funds available to implement any of this. And so with that is my presentation, and I would be glad to answer any questions or...
Sure. Might state your name as
Sure. My name is Dan Christensen, and I lived off of Cimarron for about 2 years, and back in and out. I'm a bicycler, a walker, and the one-way thing, of course, would not work, because you could either just go in or you couldn't come back out. I mean, that could work. But I've been studying it, and I think we just did a 5-foot section on one side. It would really be cost-effective and work really great, because, I mean, I'm in and out of that road many, many times. I watch other bikers and hikers and whatever, and it's dangerous. You see older people walking dogs at night and stuff, and it's like, yeah. But it's at least one side that would cut the cost considerably. So has that ever been looked at or thought about, or does that not work? Or?
The only concern I would have, especially for the cyclists, when we were...
You're fine.
Okay. When we were doing the study, we did see a lot of cyclists.
Right.
And so from a bike lane standpoint, I would personally want them to go in both sides of the
Okay.
road.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, just from a bike traveling standpoint, there are lots of accidents that happen because pedestrians or bicyclists are going against traffic. So, everybody's looking to the left to make a right turn.
Right.
Something's coming from the right.
Yeah, that's true.
We've seen too many of those accidents. So
Okay.
that would be a couple of reasons off the top of my head.
Okay, good.
Yes, hi. I live on Cochise and I like the idea for the sidewalk, but have you ever considered encroaching the swells, making something like this similar to what you have in the picture? Not wooden, but probably recyclable plastic materials that will go on the top of the swell. And this way, you will not do any of the options that you have, but you will have the swells. You will not do any more swells, no more work on it, except for something on the top of it. It will be like on stilts, that you can have always the water. Just wondering if something like that could be another option.
We've done something similar to that. Normally we do something like that when we're crossing like through wetlands.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's an option, and Chase, you may have an answer as well. I can see you over there. But just from a standpoint of maintenance, I think that would be a concern as well as cost. I don't know what it would cost to install something, basically an elevated walkway, because it would, like you said, it'd have to be supported by something.
Yeah.
And then if there ever is an issue with the drainage, how do you get to whatever it is you're trying to get to underneath where everybody's walking? So I'm not saying that's not an option, but we haven't considered it, and I think I would want to consult with the city before we pursue that.
And another thing you mentioned, that there was a problem that some of your options would be encouraging more parking on the site. Why don't you put some dividers? You know, on 95 they have those cones or sort of plastic, dividers. And they are actually helping. There will be no parking. People will be more secure.
Yeah, I think
Just something like that.
Well, so there's two things on that. Is number one, all these roads have a lot of driveways, so you'd have to not, it wouldn't apply to a driveway. So I can see,
Right.
I can see the resident pulling in at the driveway behind them and still using it, whether there was dividers. And to your point of dividers, I know that's a very expensive option, just from a maintenance standpoint. You put them in, they get run over, you gotta replace them. So that's an expensive option. Again, it's a good idea, and we can definitely talk with the city about that.
Sure.
My name is Bruce Stone. I live on Cimarron Drive. I understand a lot of people want to have walkways. If you drive on Palm Coast Parkway, there's painted lanes for bikers and walkers. And that's one thing. And we're not concerned, we're not talking about, and it hasn't been mentioned yet, what are you going to do about the speeders? And you're going to get your sidewalks or walk path, but that's not going to control people coming down Cimarron 45, 50 miles an hour. I live right on the curve. The newspapers has called it Death Valley, and I work with Adeline. I'm the guy that's gotten the police out here. I'll tell you, this has been going on for 7 years, since I've been living in Palm Coast. If I ever get hit, or one of my family gets it, I'm not gonna hesitate to sue the city. You guys have been dragging this out for 7 years. You built a park, Holland Park. I used to coach in youth basketball with Flagger. You know what you used to get up there? Drug pushers. This has been going on for 7 years. And why not put speed bumps along the curve? $25 speed bumps.
I will be glad to pass that along to the city. Like I said, we've been involved in this study. We were trying to identify options for pedestrian. We didn't focus so much on the safety, but that sounds like an option that the city can consider.
Yeah, I mean, I go walking on it because I have blood clots in both my legs. I walk on the grass. I've had people that ride the hub of the grass, and I'll scream at them. I've had someone throw paint on my driveway recently.
And that, I mean, I know that's why the city is trying to, as part of this is why they're doing the feasibility study, to identify some options. Because like 4 of the roads we found, especially one road we looked at, and I've already forgotten, I think it was, I won't even attempt to tell you which road, but it had sidewalk on both sides of the road that we looked at, and it was right against the pavement, almost like the sidewalk was the shoulder. And at first I was like, well, I've never seen that. But then I saw people biking on it and riding on it and walking their dogs and all that as we were walking out there. And I have to say, it's better than nothing. So what we're looking at is, what are the options, what's feasible? These 70 roads that we've identified is 74 miles of roadway. So this is going to be, whatever is done is not going to, probably not going to be quick, and it's probably not going to be inexpensive. I mean, it's going to cost money to make any of these improvements.
And how kind of time frame we're talking about here?
We're just trying to finish the study. We're trying to get to the point where we finish the study, and that's why we really are happy that we have such a great turnout, because we want these types of comments. We're trying to, if we can make the study better, because we've addressed some of these, that's what we want to do. That's why we're here.
The last question I'll have, just like on Palm Coast Parkway, like she mentioned, they paint the lanes so bikers and walkers can walk. Can that be something done?
We've talked about that. That is an option. If that's what we end up with a shoulder, that may be what we end up doing. Even if we don't, if we end up with any type of shoulder, one option is to paint the shoulder. Yeah. That is something we can.
And not only on Cimarron, I hope the city realizes there's been kids killed on bikes, on the F section, the S section, and the F. So I just hope they move at a lot faster pace.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So my understanding is that this is not complete at this.
Correct.
The next part will be cost estimates and whatnot?
Correct.
And funding sources other than tax base?
We haven't looked at that. We can definitely talk with the city about the options where, how and when, and that hasn't come up in discussion, but we can definitely have that discussion with the city.
I mean, I would think that this is the type of project that you can have shovel-ready in case something comes up where there may be a federal grant or an infrastructure grant available. Are there concrete plans being made right now for when that opportunity comes so that we're not behind the eight ball?
I would say, from my perspective, no, because what we're trying to do at this point is identify what option works with which road. So that's why on each of the right-of-ways, one of the options is a no-build option. And the other thing that we've talked about with the city, which is something that I think is also going to have to be addressed, is prioritizing. So if we've got 70 roads, I don't think all of these roads are created equal. So, you've already heard about Cimarron. So is there a way we, should we prioritize the roads and where, if the city has funding, where do they spend that funding?
Sir, how much are you getting paid for this study?
When we're finished, it's, the total attached, work authorization was $109,000. We will be paid probably just under $100,000 for our portion of this work.
Good question.
When the gentleman brought up prioritize, and you said several times we'll have to get with the city. At this meeting right now, is there any city commissioners?
I believe so.
Okay, so maybe if the city commissioners are here, they could answer some of these questions. I'm happy that they're here and taking it seriously. Maybe they can answer some of these questions that we have.
Good evening. My name is Carla Cody. I'm the director of the Stormwater Engineering Department, and that's too early to get into those discussions because right now we have no idea what dollars we're talking about for this overall program. So, as our consultant indicated, right now we're looking just to get feedback on the options that are feasible, what preferences the citizens like, what comments they may have that we can make improvements on the options. And then from there, we're going to identify costing of the options per the streets once they analyze the roadways and look at which options could be done in each roadway. And in terms of prioritizing the roadways, yes, that is going to be critical. There's going to be many factors that are looked at that we're going to put together in the study that we're going to take to council and get direction. And it's really an entire council that's going to provide feedback, not just a couple of them. Not the full council's not here tonight. We're not here to discuss with them this and during this analysis part of the process. And this is an unfunded program right now. Right now our pavement management program, which is severely underfunded, is coming from the same pot of money that would pay for sidewalks. A lot of those sidewalks that we built over the years, we got a lot of DOT grants, which are on our arterials. When we get into these residential roads, getting grants for those types of projects are very difficult. There are some Safe Routes to School grants that we could potentially get from FDOT, but there's limitations on how far away from the school they'll carry into those neighborhoods. So there is limited funding. The city does continue to seek out those funds and so we can progress and move forward and implement some of these projects. But the goal tonight is really just to come up with the options, alternatives, the scenarios, the preferences, so we can finalize the report and then have those discussions with our council in terms of here's the outcomes, here's the recommendations. Some of the recommendations may be cost prohibitive because there's no way to pay for them. It's way outside the budget. There's no funding source. So there may be some interim options that are done in lieu of it. It may not be the preferred option, but that may be all that we could afford. So all those are gonna have to be taken into account, and we'll have to come up with an implementation plan. It may require additional funding sources. We don't know, we're not at that point yet. So right now, we're not trying to focus on the dollars of how this is gonna happen. It's really, what are we recommending happen, what can happen, what's the analysis, what's feasible. So that's really the focus of tonight's meeting and the comments we're trying to get back on in terms of what can we do for you guys in the community and make it pedestrian friendly and safe for everybody.
You gotta figure it out.
I read. I'm not gonna go look at the savings if I know I can't afford it. I mean, why would I even make that? If you understand what I'm
Right,
saying.
well,
You gotta know how much money we have, what kind of options.
as they stated, some of the options are safer. So there's gonna be a cost of providing a safer option. So is that 4 times the cost, 5 times the cost? We will be working through that in the report, in the final report. They're gonna be giving us some costing options for every 1,000 feet, for every option, saying, all right, this one's gonna cost $10,000 per 1,000 feet, and this one's gonna cost you 100 grand. Okay, well, what are the benefits to that option over this option? Well, this one's gonna be safer because there's separation from the road. So
that's what we're paying you for, is to get those answers.
right, we're not at that point yet. We're just here, let's look at the options, let's get feedback from the citizens. You know, some people like the shoulders on the road because they like to bike a lot, you know, and those are the preferences. But then there's downsides of all the lawn, you know, maintenance folks are gonna be parking in those shoulders potentially. So is that really gonna be a conflict with pedestrians? You know, we're looking to get feedback from you guys in terms of what do you see as pitfalls that we may have overlooked, so we can incorporate those when we finalize the report.
There you go.
Reality is,
Everything we've said ourselves, what they're paying them
Right, and then,
$100,000.
you know, the sheriff's office is in charge of enforcement, you know. Those are the items that we will get into when we discuss those options of, okay, what are the potential issues? How can we prevent them? How can we enact enforcement? And so that's really gonna be the second part when we look at the preferred options, because we can't foresee everything up front, but because those options may not be the recommended solution. So we'll have to analyze that and look at that.
Again, I live on concerned about all of them. I want walking, but I'm more concerned about the traffic. There is a curve when you drive down Center.
Dead man's curve.
Why don't you make that a right? You said it can't be done legally. When the county says it can. So who's right?
I think our traffic engineer did look at that.
So your question was about the curve, and why can't we post it as a legal requirement that you can only go around it at this speed? Because that's not how, that the reply is the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is a rule for how we post signs, does not allow that for every road in the United States.
But if it's in the Franklin County, you can do what you want.
There are locations which do not follow the MUTCD, but that's at their own risk because they're encountering additional liability and they're potentially putting themselves in jeopardy of losing federal funding.
I am Dan Bryant, live off of Cimarron on Cross Cape. Just had a question. I like the options. I'm particularly partial to the wider shoulders option because I'm a cyclist. But would the idea be to, for the existing mailboxes, they would be moved back away from the road?
Yes, if you're widening the road, we would want to have,
And
similar clearances.
the other thing I was wondering is, I like the idea of painted demarcation, because that might encourage people from, especially tradesmen
Yeah,
and
we-
lawn service and parking on the road, which is,
And even though we didn't talk about this tonight, one of the things that's gained a lot of popularity is called a buffered bike lane.
Mhm.
And that basically will be a stripe next to the travel lane and one or more stripes closer to the bike lane, if
Yeah.
that's what we were to do. And so if we had, let's say we had 7 feet,
Mhm.
then we might have the outside 5 feet be the bike lane, and then have 2 feet of buffer, and then the travel lane.
oh, that'd be nice.
So you'd have some clearances, and that seems to be a great safety.
That sounds good. Do they also put, I was wondering about, I'll call them a rumble strip, or reflector, whatever the small mounts that you put in, and then sort of this term for them. RPM.
Yeah, reflective pavement markers.
Yeah, are those an option or not? To demarcate?
If you had, I'd say it would probably not be an option if we
Okay.
didn't have a buffered bike lane. But with a buffered bike lane, I would say, yes, that would be definitely an option. We could put the RPMs on the travel side of it and not put them on the bike side, so that they become a hazard. You know, you wouldn't want somebody
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
get that.
Very good.
So that's an option.
Okay, great, thank you.
There's also a noise concern associated with that.
Oh, yeah.
So if you put too many of those and people are striking them too often, residences right there would hear all the noise.
They strike it too often, they're nailing us.
Hi, my name is Pat Herod, and I like all of the work being done, all of the pictures, all of that, but immediately, can we have a crosswalk? I hear reflectors, painting, whatever, on that curve. I've lived in there for 4 or 5 years. That curve comes up on me. I don't know if anybody's on the other side of it. There's no crosswalk saying there's a pedestrian possible in front of me or anything. It's a blank curve that people abuse. I'd also like a crosswalk out Cimarron across from Palm Harbor. It's a highway trying to cross to get to anything. It's a highway. People are turning left, right, straight. It's what, 45, 40 miles an hour there? Why, a little bit of paint to let a pedestrian cross the highway?
Stop.
What is it? There's like 1,600 cars going in and out of there during the day. A little bit of paint on the curve that says, hey, don't fall asleep on this curve. There's something on the other side. It's almost like a 45-degree turn there. A sign on the side is really cool, but it's not reminding me that there's kids and bikes and elderly and wheelchairs that can be on that curve. That's a blind curve, and that's crossing the highway is kind of tricky. Paint, a bucket of paint, something. I hear all the things you can't do, and it makes me wonder what we could do in there. The people that live in there. If I was a billionaire, can I build my own safety place to live? By the way, I'm not. But anyway, thank you.
So in response to that, I'm gonna put Mike back on the spot, but I don't know, we didn't look at it from let Mike answer this, is from a standpoint of, you're asking for a crosswalk, well, we didn't look specifically at where people were crossing the road.
It doesn't
But if
matter.
it,
It doesn't matter.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
all right. So normally, where you try to put a crosswalk is where people cross the road. So if people are crossing the road at that location, which I don't know if they are or aren't,
No, they're not.
well, so we don't normally put a crosswalk where somebody's not gonna use it. You wanna, there may be other warning things that we can do, and I'll let Mike answer that. But I know from a crosswalk standpoint, it's normally where would the people cross, and can we make this location as safe as possible? And the problem with putting it somewhere else is if you put crosswalks where nobody ever crosses, then the places where they do cross, people aren't gonna be paying attention. Just like you said, they may not see the sign, or they know that at this location, people never cross. And then when they get to one where somebody is crossing, that can cause a problem. So that's I'll get off my soapbox, but,
I would be happy to answer your question after the meeting, because this forum's about what can we do about a sidewalk. pedestrian crosswalks and where they go. The other opportunity is, if you don't get a chance to meet with me and I don't answer your question satisfactorily, the city has an application called Palm Coast Connect. In it, you can send a question that goes to the city, and the people who operate that app get it to the right person in our office who can get you an official answer to what you're looking for. So I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards about an individual crossing, but right now I want to concentrate on the sidewalk options.
Okay, who is it I should get in touch with again?
One moment. What was your question, ma'am? Thank you. Okay.
No, I would like to say something.
Pavlock, I live directly on Cimarron, 105. We are about 2 blocks from the sanctuary. I'm sorry, any sanctuary people that might be in here. They're the worst speeders. They have speed bumps, I believe. They're required to drive very slowly around the sanctuary. They hit the gates, and by the time they hit my house, they're doing about 50. And my concern at this point, everything you've told us here for your $100,000 is not anything different than the neighborhood has discussed. So we've all had these questions and different options. We're one that our paver driveway is going to be torn up and our driveway will be gone back. We are bike riders. I tend to ride bike almost down the middle of the street because that's the only way you can slow these drivers down. We bought in 2008. We knew we bought on a main road. That's our problem. However, the construction that has happened on Cimarron and into the sanctuary, there's like 70 still lots that are being developed in there, not to mention all the other ones that are on the artery roads that come into it. It's insane. The traffic, the speed of the construction trucks, and they're not going to stop on a dime. I have actually called, I've taken numbers, I have called construction companies, cement people. I've said, I'm reporting your driver right now. Next time I see him speeding down my road, I'm calling the sheriff. So in the interim, while we're discussing all of these options that we have, which are many which will affect me derogatively, I have a beautiful yard, we need something temporarily. We either need better police coverage for tickets. We need temporary speed bumps. I know I hate them as much as everybody else does, but we have got to slow the traffic down. Dead Man's Curve. I have been run off the road on my bike. I have been passed many times with oncoming cars. And, you know, something has to be done to protect your citizens now. It can't wait 3 years, it can't wait 5 years, it can't wait for you guys to finish looking at all these options. And even though we appreciate the fact that you're looking at them finally, you know. So, anyway, told my husband I wouldn't say anything tonight.
When it comes to speeding, we get reports of speeding from residents, and they come in again through Palm Coast Connect. What we do is we have a handshake operation with the Flagler County Sheriff. We, the city, will follow up by going out and recording the speeds that we find on a 24-hour period on that road. And we do it with a detection device that you're not going to notice. It's on a little pole, doesn't look like anything to make anybody notice that they should change their driving habit. And then we'll give that speed histogram to the sheriff's office. They then use that information to decide when they're going to send, when or if they're going to send a police officer out to patrol that area. and they do it based on what the time periods where they saw speeding occurring, they'll send somebody out there and address that. So if you're getting speeding problems, send in a ticket to Palm Coast Connect. If you got 2 weeks later, you got speeding problems, send in another ticket to Palm Coast Connect. We will follow up on it, and we will work with the sheriff's office to get some response.
Hello, I'm George Wade. If you want input, I'll give you my input. And most of the neighbors that I've talked to would be very happy if they could have a sidewalk at least on one side, separated by something. I personally don't think a paint's going to protect me when I'm riding my bike, or even rumble strips. But I think if I'm off the road on a sidewalk, I think that's an ideal situation. And as a side note, there is a 20-mile-an-hour sign going into Dead Man's Curve, but I think it's getting covered up by some limbs or something. And there's also the trees on Dead Man's Curve that are kind of growing out into the road. And so if you're driving, if a panel truck is going by there, or maybe it could be a motorhome, they have a tendency, as I may have a tendency, to, other people, I wouldn't do this, but other people, when they encounter those trees going into the road, they kind of go over a little bit on the other side and hope there's not a car coming the other way. I wouldn't do that. Some people would.
So just to say, you a response, I think that's a Palm Coast Connect. If anything, I think from the city's perspective, if you see something, you know, as a city, they can't be everywhere. So if you see something that's happening, both the visibility of the sign as well as maybe encroaching into the roadway, I'm sure the city can address those issues.
Hello, I'm Pete Minervini, and I live off Cochise. And I ride my bike or walk every single day on Cimarron. And I happen to be the guy with the RV who swings around those tree limbs. And you'll see me out there with my golf cart and a 10-foot pole, and I'm cutting off those tree limbs with my golf cart and my ladder, just so other people don't have to do what I do. But me personally, riding my bike on the sidewalk with people walking, I'm not going to ride my bike on the sidewalk. I don't ride on the bike path on Palm Harbor because people are walking there with their dogs. I like to ride my bike for exercise, so I go faster than they're walking. It's like putting a tractor on a highway. It's really, not a good situation. So I'm still going to use the street, whether there's a sidewalk or not. That'll help me though, because people who walk, just like when I walk against traffic. And then a bicyclist comes and has to go around me. So that's really the hazard, the people walking against traffic, and a bicyclist going with traffic, and then a car behind him, and we both have to go around the person who's walking, and he's got no place to go. Right now, they don't want to move. I know, I walk myself, and I don't want to move off the side of the road. I got my nice sneakers on, they're going to get wet and muddy. So I want to stay on that road. So if there's a little widening of the road or a sidewalk, it's really going to help. Everybody's not going to benefit from either or, but at least the people walking will be off the road. And then us bicyclists can go with the flow of traffic and observe the rules of the road. You know, that Dead Man's Curve, you need a stop sign there really to stop all of the speeding. You need 2 stop signs, 1 each way. So they have to stop and then start going again. At least people can walk while the person stopped there or be seen, because they go too fast. So, and I wouldn't want to live in front of that, a stop sign myself. So I would be.
My name is Ophelia. I'm married to this man, and I agree with every word that he just said, but I would like to say I so am pleased to see the amount of people that are here and the fact that the city is working on this. I appreciate all the time and all the effort into it. It's a very serious thing to us. I personally will not walk or ride my bike anywhere on, near, down Cimarron or on Cochise, because I'd be risking my life.
That's how I feel about it. So whatever you do to improve, I would personally like the sidewalk, but the bicycle lane, separate for the bicycle people, that I love. If that can work, whatever can work, just thank you, and please continue to move forward. We appreciate your time and your effort, so thank you.
Thank you, Ed Fuller. First of all, thank you so much, Carl, and your staff. Thank you very much for doing this, because, you know, people have talked, and you're listening. And you not only listen, you act it. This is a big problem. If it could be solved overnight, I think you'd do it. Not think, I know you do it, because you're tasked to do it. That's what you do. So I think a little patience wouldn't hurt. But I also think maybe we need to do a workshop with law enforcement, okay? How many tickets are issued on Cimarron, all right? Targeted law enforcement works. You know, it doesn't matter, you could put in a sidewalk, you could put in a barrier, but if you got the person who's behind the wheel is reckless, you're gonna get hurt. That is a reckless road. And I think it's not the solution, but it's part of it. Also, you know, the part about like safety bumps, well, unfortunately, you know, we have a lot of people who are getting transported, you know, by the ambulance. And they're gonna get jostled every time you come over it. I don't think that's a really good, it may help speeders, but if you're in that gurney and you're getting jostled, I don't think that's a good idea. And as far as like the one way, I think everybody can agree. No.
You'll have the helicopter and ferry and stop the other end.
And I'm not speaking for anybody, but you know.
Get on the ferry and go back.
Right. But immediately, I don't think we need with all due respect, we don't need would you say it was a meter that measures, you know, speeders? It happens on Cimarron. If it's once too many. And that curve is a problem, there's no question about it. Maybe markings, and those are little things that can make a big difference right now. And I would like to see really a presentation by the Sheriff's Department, what they can do, what they will do, and what they're going to do on some of these incidents. And they could, maybe you could workshop that. At least just a suggestion. I don't know that, but that's an immediate solution. And we already paid more money for more officers, and they can target that area, and they should. And if everybody's shaking their head, am I wrong about the safety and the drivers? They're not.
Right.
And I'm not picking on anybody, but it's like, really? You see kids with these bicycles, or not bicycles, when they get dropped off by the buses or picked up, it's amazing how insensitive people are. It's just, they don't pay attention. But I'll shut up. But those are just some ideas. We already got one off the deal, the one way, forget it. But I would love to see the Sheriff's Department give a presentation on what their solutions would be, because they can certainly survey that. And I'd also like to do, you know, the fire department, you know, as far as what they see is, because they're driving that road all the time. They're encountering, you know, and they're in a very stressful situation. And maybe they could give some feedback. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Rhonda Stickford. I live on Comanche Court, which is off of Cimarron. And I would either walk or ride my bike numerous times a week, all the way up Cimarron, all of our Cochise, Cottonwood, Collingwood. I do the whole route. And I've been nearly taken out numerous times by yard people, because their trailers are like 9 feet wide and they don't stop so that oncoming traffic can get through, and they try and squeeze by me. And you know, in my old age, if I got startled by this trailer coming by me, I could easily wobble and fall into this. It's definitely very dangerous, but I get it. All of these options, many of them are so expensive. that frankly, I just don't see, especially with everything rising costs the way they are, that many of them would be an option. So if most of them turn out to be way too expensive, what can be done? I mean, Florida Park has one sidewalk. Now, it's not, I would say, the ideal for sure. And I've heard of a bicyclist that got hit driving his bike down Florida Park. But something clearly needs to be done. And if it's just one side with a sidewalk, you know, as I said, it's probably not ideal, but at least it can help some. So what option, I mean, at the end of all of this study, and the city has time to talk about it and see if they have a budget. Well, if they have nothing, then what do we do? Because obviously the neighborhoods are growing exponentially. I've got 3 or 4 new neighbors myself in lots that were not occupied. So I kind of would like to know if there is a last ditch effort, what it might be. I did not see anything that even looked like that on the presentation.
And I don't, I'll take a stab at it. You feel free to add, but we're not at that point, but we are, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to identify what are the problems, what are the options, what option makes sense for which roadway, and then at some point it'll be, well, how do we prioritize? For example, one of the things that we did, which wasn't in the report, was if you had road A, whatever road A was, well, a lot of these roads had roads off of them. So to prioritize, if you have a road that has 10 roads off of them, that each of those 10 roads could also use this sidewalk, then to me, that seems like that would be a bigger priority than exactly the same road that only had houses on that road and no streets off of it. Because the potential users of the sidewalk in the first option is a lot more than the potential users of the sidewalk in the second option. And I think those are the types of questions the city's gonna have to wrestle with on how do we implement. Now that we have a plan, how do we implement them? That's my take.
I don't think we really have much to add to that. Every option is going to have dollars attached to it. It's either you do nothing or you do something. Some of them are going to be more costly than others, but if there's no money to do any of them, it's a do nothing mechanism because there's no money. So everything costs money. So you want something, money has to be tied to it. Money has to come from somewhere, which is the citizens. So that's why we got to put together a plan and get direction from this council and work up solutions on how, where it's a funding site.
Bye.
If the city started this whole investigation or this process, they have to have some type of thought process of putting money towards it.
Yeah, council.
$100,000, if they were thinking that, well, of course they would tell us we should put sidewalks, we have to have some money. We're not gonna spend $100,000 and say, oh, it's a great idea, but we don't have any money, so we're not gonna do it.
Yeah, council prioritized this and that task staff was doing the study, coming up with alternatives and options for the various roadways and cost implications, high-level cost budgets.
But the city has to have some thought process that they're gonna be putting money into this. I mean, you can't, they're not paying someone $100,000 to say, these are the options, and then they're gonna say, oh, those are great options, but we don't really have any money, so we're not gonna do it.
Is it a $10 million project or a $50 million project? We don't know yet.
But they have to have some process that they're gonna put some money towards it. They're not idiots, they don't, they know what costs money.
There's many options. It could be a 50-year plan, a 10-year plan. What's the implementation plan going to look like? Where are those dollars going to come from? All that's going to be hatched up later. Right now, we're just trying to do an assessment and identify what can be done. Well, but then there's some characteristics of recommendations. Council will be the ultimate decision maker.
No, I'm asking you,
we're gonna put together a draft price implementation classification or prioritization characteristics
For example,
based on how many citizens it serves or how many homes it serves.
Right, exactly.
Is it a one-way roadway? Is it close walkability to schools or parks? There'll be different factors. We haven't finalized all the criteria for how each one's going to be weighted, but
So
that's going to be part of what we're working on. That we'll have a draft put together for council discussion.
Hi, my name is Bernie Jacobson. I'm in Cedar Hollow Court. First off, I'd like to say, we've been to a couple of these meetings, and I want to start by saying thank you for getting the signs out. It seems like that may not be a big deal to many, but I could actually see a difference having the signs out, that share the walkway. I walk my dog regularly, an 80-pound lab, and he's not going to move over. We're on the street, so. People, I do see that they're watched, they go around now. I think that there's been improvement. That's first. Second, on opinions on this, I think as you're looking at it, definitely consider as well that it's not just pedestrian, it is people with pets, dogs as well, and getting a little bit away from the street is definitely beneficial. That's all.
My name is Nick Caruso. We moved here a couple of weeks ago, probably less than a month now, we're in Palm Coast. Anyway, my question is a simple one. What is your timeline that this report has to be handed in to the city council? So by the end of June, you're going to give it to them what you recommend, A, B, C, and D, right? Okay. I look forward to it.
Hello, my name is Bruce Horton. I live on Comanche Court. My question is about handicap and people that have disabilities, moving a wheelchair on 1, 2, and 3 options. Is that looked at?
Yeah, we didn't spend much time on it, but there was a mention of ADA, that's the Americans with Disabilities Act, so to make sure that everything is built, and that also causes a challenge. Somebody mentioned, I think you mentioned Florida Park as an example. They're trying to make sure that we build it so that somebody in a wheelchair, somebody that has visibility issues, we got to make it as safe as possible, and that becomes part of the challenge, because one of the things that when we first met with the city, they pointed out is, we measured one driveway that had a 21% slope. So, it's almost like the house was probably 6 feet taller than the road. So there's challenges that we're going to be facing with this, and that's part of the concern.
As part of the presentation, you did some great options, but again, I could see with the rising costs that none of those might even be feasible. And it seems to me there should be an option of something that maybe is much less. Maybe you put just a walkway or a sidewalk or a shoulder, something. If all of those end up being too expensive, well, we can at least do this.
I think what they presented is everything that's technically feasible that could potentially be ADA compliant. So they do show a shoulder option, a sidewalk along the road. So I think every technical feasible option is shown and explored in here. We didn't leave anything off the table that would meet any criteria that would be sustainable and not provide the city with any liability.
When you're looking at that, you said the sidewalks, is it on both sides or just one side?
We haven't gotten to that point, but let me try to answer it this way. For the shoulders, all of the options showed the shoulders on both sides. For the sidewalk, all those options showed it on one side. But there is no reason not to have it on both sides. And I think if money were no object, all of the roads would have sidewalks on both sides of the road. The problem is, how do you get from where we are today to that perfect scenario? And that's the challenge. So again, I think part of the challenge is going to be prioritizing and having a plan, just like they did in 2008 to get to today with the 130 miles of pedestrian, improvements that have already been made. How do we take the next step to tackle these next 74 miles of roadways that are on the next priority list?
My name's Samantha. Thank you for doing all of this. I'm just nervous about, he had said that, you had mentioned if there's schools in the area. There's no schools up here, but there's school buses. My children are on 2 different buses, 2 different times a day, so 4 different times a day. They're getting on and off a bus and then having to walk on Cimarron. Someone's gonna get hurt. And I think something needs to be done a lot sooner than later.
Yeah, and to the point about the schools, is some of the roads were actually, there were schools on some of these roads. And so that was, the point is, if there's already kids walking to school and they don't have sidewalks, I think from the city's perspective, that's a pretty high priority. But to your point, I mean, we're looking at all of this, and safety is gonna be an issue as well.
So these roads are all gonna be, we're not just gonna get all sidewalks or all widenings of the road. It could be piecemeal, like some roads might get sidewalks.
Like, I know the one-way option has already been
Right, that's out.
down, but
Yeah,
there may
because
be,
there's only one road in.
There may be a road or two where that's a good option.
Sure,
So
yeah.
we're just saying, here are the options.
Okay.
We're gonna at some point try to match up what we think the option from my, I'm just speaking for my, I don't wanna speak for the city, but from my perspective as a project manager, I really like the sidewalk option. And it even goes back to what you said earlier.
Yeah.
I think any improvement we can make, if it's shoulders, that's an improvement. That's gonna be
Yeah.
better than it is today. So what we're trying to say is, ideally, I think the goal of this study when we started was where can we put sidewalks? That's the goal, is we want to do a sidewalk, a pedestrian feasibility study, and we'd rather have the pedestrians on sidewalks, and we'd rather have separation between the travel lane and the sidewalk. But if that's not feasible, back to your point, what are the options? And so we've identified things that are less expensive, some that are more expensive, and that's what we're trying to get through by the end of next month.
Okay.
You said the report you're planning to do as a presentation at the end of June towards the board, is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's mid-June, it's the city council workshop in June, I don't have that date.
Yeah, I want to say off the top of my head, it's June 14th for the next presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think the study is due at the end of that month. So I think we are tasked with being finished with everything that we're doing by the end of June. But I think the next public opportunity to hear this is going to be at that, I think it's a June 14th meeting.
Okay, as far as you say, guidelines that you're using to prioritize your project, what are your top 5 priorities?
We haven't gotten to that point. So
Will that be part of what is going to be presented to the
yeah,
meeting in June?
like for example, one of the things that I think is going to be a top priority is how much does each of these things cost, which we haven't done yet. So for example, the sidewalk and piping the ditch, that's going to be the most expensive option. That may be, to Carl's point, might be 10 times more than the next highest option.
Okay,
So
my prioritizing is, you listed there, how many different names of streets that you have?
70.
70
is what we
streets?
looked at. I think we're down to 66 that we're looking to make
Okay.
improvements.
How are you going to determine who's going to be first, second, third, fourth in this project
I
to be
think
accomplished?
the first thing, like I tried to answer, is if number 1 costs $100 million and number 2 costs $100,000, does number 2 go ahead of number 1? That's what we have to, I don't think we can answer any question until we know how much this will cost. To Carl's point, if there's no money, maybe they're all the same priority. If we have infinite amount of money, maybe they're all the same priority. But I don't know that we can answer any of that until we dig deeper into how much each option is going to cost. I know that doesn't answer your question, but I don't know how to answer it any other way.
Well, it's just,
We did touch upon some of the factors, like how many homes does the sidewalk or pedestrian feasibility area will serve? So if it only serves 100 residents, or if it serves 500, the 500 one's probably going to score higher. Now, if it
Okay,
has
so
a
by
school.
number of people in the area will be like a top priority?
Well, it'll be one of the factors, and we'll make some recommendations, and then that'll be part of the ranking that will get presented to council, saying this is how we establish the criteria. These are the criteria we came up with in the ranking in
Okay,
terms
so,
of
all right, I guess
factor.
maybe that was my poor choice of wording then. Is there some sort of a ranking going to be presented?
That's correct, that's what I just said, right. We haven't established all the criteria. Proximity to school, if it's within a walk zone to the school that students, there's the bus service, that's gonna have a high factor in the ranking. If it serves more homes than less homes, it's gonna have a higher factor. So when they get ranked in those priorities, those streets are gonna be higher priority than other streets that have low population, aren't within the school, aren't near a park, serve very few residents. Those are gonna be lower priority roads. Now, that's not to say that that lower priority road, if it's only a quarter-mile long and it's just a shoulder and it's only gonna cost $100,000 and the number 2 project costs $5 million, number 2 may not get built first, even though it's a much higher priority ranking because there's only limited funds in the budget, so that's where cost is gonna have some role into that as well. So we're still working through that criteria. But those are some of the items that will be looked at when we try to establish that initial recommendation on setting priorities.
Thank you.
Are you considering any partial implementations?
So what was included in there is we are considering interim solutions. So, for example, maybe the shoulders are an interim solution. You know, if that's where a lot of this is going to be, you know, what the city determines. What is a priority? If we can't build a sidewalk, which was maybe the ideal solution, can we add 3 feet to each side of this road and create shoulders that now at least address maybe the bike lanes? It's not great, but now the pedestrians would have a space that was not dedicated to the travel lane, which is what everybody in here, I'm assuming, that lives on one of these 70 roads is now dealing with today. Is if you're walking or biking, you're in the street with cars traveling in 2 directions. You have a question?
No, I was just waving to this gentleman.
Oh, okay.
I will make a comment, since my wife and I don't keep my favorite bike ride.
All right.
My name's Randy, too. Thank you for what you've done. Carl, thank you for what you continue to do. So the only thing I'd like to say is, from a takeaway, Carl, I'll put this to you and echo what Ed just had to say. And I think for something for an immediate fix for safety, and whether we're weighing safety versus price, or how do you put a dollar amount to safety? But for right now, I think we need to get the police involved to do an assessment, to do something out there to slow things down, whether it be a light or whatever, like we do in Florida Parkway. But something right now to put a fix to the speeders, at least take a little action immediately with the police patrol. That's going to be the immediate thing that's going to do something. This is going to take a long time to get it done. So I would just suggest that we go back, turn a little bit of the direction toward the sheriff, and see if we can get him involved in taking some action.
Yeah, thank you on that. We will pursue and have those discussions with the sheriff's office and see if we can get something moving on that front.
Any other questions? All right. Well, we'll be here if you have questions and want to talk to us one-on-one.